Hi, everyone. This is Doug, and this episode is going to be the latest revision of Shabbat Order of Worship for those who have a Yeshua Words Only fellowship. And I personally do it online with a few people, and I recommend you find others in a small group to do that. And that way you will be building each other up and praying for each other on a regular basis, and you won't be lost in a big crowd of other people. So that I think is the way Yeshua meant it. So let's go begin with this episode. Now, the very first slide has been improved a little bit here. This is where it says, "Truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is an apostle greater than the one who sent him." The word apostle we made sure was put in here. And this is from John 13:16 in the Young's literal translation. And what we're doing is revealing the Greek noun there, apostle, which is hidden by 87% of the translations. And I'm just going to show you proof of that. This is not part of the worship service, but I just want you to see that. So if you go to all the 32 Bible snippets of this particular verse on Bible Hub, you will find 28 out of 32 obscure that the word is apostle there. And they'll use words like messenger or one that is sent. Why would you do that? Because the first part of it is saying the servant is not greater than his master. So that covers all of, any messenger is a servant, right? So you don't need that. This was specifically Jesus using the word apostle for a point, is that if somebody claims to be an apostle of his, and we know there's 12, and there's even a 13th who claims he's an apostle of Jesus, and many, many people make the 13th more important than Jesus. In fact, they say he has a completely new dispensation that we should follow, and we can basically reject the Jesus of the earth because he wasn't as informed or knowledgeable as the ascended Jesus, who's somehow communicating with the 13th apostle. Well, can that make that apostle who has never met the real Jesus on earth, can that apostle, alleged apostle, can he become even greater than the master, which is what most people have done because they're words of Jesus of earth, and the words of whoever is speaking to the 13th person is not the same. It's totally disjointed from each other. So this is why we begin every service. Let's go back here. Every service begins with this message about this verse, that the apostle, there's no apostle greater than the one who sent him. All right. And then the next verse or panel we do is to remind ourselves, get us centered on why do we say we're Yeshua words only. For one is your rabbi, your teacher, the Messiah, and you are all brothers and sisters, El Delphoi, Matthew 23, verse 8. So we're all disciples of Christ. He is our master, and the disciple wants to learn everything that teacher is teaching us. And this is added new as if today I like this. But Jesus called them unto him and said, this is Matthew 20, verses 25 to 26 in the NIV. And it reads, but Jesus called them unto himself and said, you know that the rulers, the archon of the Gentiles, exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your servant. Matthew 20, verses 25 to 26, NIV. Okay, and this is a great way to set the mood of every get together, because we are now a fellowship of all equal persons. There's nobody who's in charge. There's nobody who makes themselves more important than anybody else. And sometimes, though, it's useful to have a famous quote from somebody who can corroborate what Jesus is saying, and that is obviously following Jesus at this point. Maybe later in life, this person I'm going to quote didn't follow Jesus and created things that were inimical to the very quote I'm going to give you, but that doesn't matter. He was reading Jesus correctly originally. And this is Luther. And this is what Luther, in the book called Temporal Authority, to What Extent It Should Be Obeyed, 1523. So that's an actual name of the sermon. It was in Martin Luther's Selected Writings, 1517 to 1520, by Tippert, Fortress Press, 2007 and 307. So this is undisputably Luther. Listen to this. This is 1523. Among Christians, there is no superior but Christ himself, and him alone. What kind of authority can there be where all are equal and have the same right, power, possession, and honor? and where no one desires to be the other's superior, but each the other's subordinate. Where there are such people, one could not establish authority even if he wanted to, since in the nature of things it is impossible to have superiors where no one is willing or able to be superior. Where there are no such people, i.e., no one willing to just all be equal, however, there are no real Christians either. So he is saying the definition of a Christian is someone who is obedient to Christ and making all of us in that same category all equal with each other, and no one is the superior of the other. So each one of us is not accountable to Doug or Bob or somebody else. You're accountable to Jesus Christ, and he in turn is holding you accountable to God Yahweh. So this is, I think, a great verse to keep. Now, that doesn't mean if this is going to be in the slideshow that you have, you can just go past it once you feel this has made its point, and then everybody has this in mind. But it's a great reminder that of something that's crucial. If something is a little out of whack in your group, and somebody's trying to be in charge and tell people what to do, and is being too controlling about doctrine or whatever, you can say, hey, nobody here is in charge. Everybody is free to give their opinion in a true church of Jesus Christ about anything, and teach the others what Jesus is saying, and bring to memory something that they have forgotten or have ignored because of the passage of time and so on. Things rub off and away. That's just kind of the nature of things. You need to refresh sometimes points of view, and I'll show you what I mean. I'll show you a perfect example of what I mean and why these PowerPoints or PDF, you can have it in either version when you go to the link we're going to give you in the description. I forgot about this. So I was promoting prayer in the group, and people would pray publicly and all that. But I'm remembering Jesus. Somebody last week reminded us, what about this? This is what Jesus says in Matthew 6, verses 5-8. And when you pray, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. So these are people who want to look holy, and that's why they're praying. And what do you think God is thinking about that? So that's not a good look. And the point of this is that even though you might really be praying sincerely, it doesn't have a good look to God. Okay. Now that doesn't mean you don't do prayers over thanking food, because that is actually in the Torah. Is that it's actually after the meal, but it can be before the meal in certain seasonal holidays, by the way. So you would have prayers regarding meals, and they would be publicly spoken, but they were very confined, and it was a very limited thing that you're supposed to say. And the Jews had these things all memorized. So we need to do things like that, and I suggest we confine what we're doing in verbally spoken words in prayer with others that are limited to those situations that God's law even demands it, or suggests it, or supports it. But otherwise, you can get to the position where some people are praying with the not with the intention, but the impression that by taking up time about praying, it puts a good light on themselves, and so, or they think they need to do it to look more spiritual to other people, and that's not at all what the purpose of prayer is. It should be a prayer to God Yahweh in the name of Yeshua. So anyway, let's keep reading what Jesus says. Yeshua says, but thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when you have shut the door, pray to your Father which is in secret, and your Father which sees in secret shall reward you openly. So that's what God cares about, what you would do with your time when nobody is watching. Pray to Yahweh, the Father. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen, meaning the Gentiles, do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. And by the way, when people say, oh, Jesus was going to the Gentiles first, the Israelites first, that means the Gentiles were not part of that dispensation. No, what it was is, if you go talk to Gentiles who are of this mindset, this is what you end up. You get chaotic prayer life where people are praying out loud and making vain repetitions. So this is what Jesus is trying to prevent by going to the Jews first, getting people who are solidly trained in how to determine biblical canon. You don't determine biblical canon by what came last and by inferring that since it's existing after something else, it's superior to it. Okay, that is not biblical. That is something that is made up, and that's it's totally wrong. That what came last is going to supervene what came before. It's actually what came before tests what comes next, and it has to be consistent. God's word does grow in covenants, but if God came with a completely new covenant that was retroactively wiping out all the covenants that had ever been before, well, then that would be a false covenant. Okay, verse 8: Be not you therefore like unto them, for your Father knows what things are you have need of before you ask Him. Okay, so this is just a reminder that here this is something I realized a long time ago, but when I was setting up with some friends the JWO or Yeshua Awards only meetings via Zoom, I would have prayer time, and I forgot about this. I mean, this just goes to show you is we got out of practice during COVID, and we weren't having any services for a long time because I was ill. So that's really what's going on here is we have a message from Jesus that we're not supposed to be even doing this. So I think that's probably the right way to go. But you may say no. Okay, but you have to look at the verse, and that's going to be in the message. So it's a warning, clearly a warning, and there are obviously exceptions because there's the prayers at mealtime. Okay, so let's go back to the order of worship though. All right, so back to where we were before. So we did the opening where the apostle is not greater than the one who sent him, and then where's the sole rabbi, and then we have that we're all equal brothers and sisters. This is in Matthew 20, 25, 20 to 26. And now we're going to take a look at, and then we saw the Luther passage. Now we're going to go back over here. So the next thing is we have songs for worship, open in song. And I have this song from Praises for Yahweh Band, very good band, very good song. And what you do is you can literally from your PowerPoint when you're playing it, or you can preset this up, is you just click that link and now this song will play. And then we have another song that we recommend, and it's Hallelujah, revised by the Set Apart channel. And as you find songs that you like, you can just do the same thing, which is just get a link, put it into the PowerPoint, because you're going to have the PowerPoint copy yourself. You can edit it, add the link, and then click that button during the service. And the only thing you need to do is make sure your Zoom setting is share system sound. So you go look for that. Otherwise, no one else can hear the YouTube playing on your laptop or your device unless you share system sound through Zoom. All right. And then the service launches into a deeper level of praying this or speaking this as a community. This is Jesus quoting what's called the Shema, which in Hebrew means listen or obey. And it's from Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 5. Jesus quotes it in Mark 12, verses 29 to 31, and he calls it the most and first most important command, which is the Lord our God is one God, Yahweh. That's what it actually says. So we put the words in that are in the original prayer. Now, we have a link at the bottom there for a YouTube where we have had a friend of the ministry, Mimi, record her reading the passage of Mark 12, verse 29 to 31. And if any of you have ever attended a Dutch Reformed church, that means a church that grew up in the Netherlands, that dialect of speaking English is so, how can I put it? It seems so spiritual to me. And that's just the way I experienced my first walk into a Protestant church was to go to a Norman Vincent Peale Dutch Reformed church or something like that near me in the Bronx, and I was still a Catholic, and I thought this was so beautiful. Just the language itself was so heavenly. It sounded like. So when I hear Mimi reading it, it's like hearing the angels sing in a verse. All right, so that's my recommendation, to use Mimi's reading, or you can read it each week. Okay, and then we have a series of slides that you can just pass through one by one. And what we do is we follow the protocol of what the Dead Sea Scrolls community of the 200 BC era were doing with the Psalms. They literally took the verse, and after each verse, they would then say the words, praise Yahweh and praise his name forever and ever. And they did this with Psalm 145. And that's how it was discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we can actually recreate the way, probably even in Jesus' own day, people were worshiping God, Yahweh, using the Psalms by having basically a responsorial statement of the community. So someone would read, a single person would read, I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. And the community would say, praise Yahweh and praise his name forever and ever. So you can do that as a group, and it shows you how you can gain community with people who are no longer here, but whose way of worship you can now replicate. So it's just a wonderful discovery in the Dead Sea Scrolls that teaches us a little bit how we can make this truer for ourselves and share readings from the Psalms. And then we have many, many pages. So this goes on to verses 4, 5, and 6. All right, so now you'll be up to the personal praise and thanksgiving time and prayer requests. And so now you'll deal with that issue in your group about praying in public. Does that include in this setting that we're doing here? And that's each group can make their own decision on how that works. What does Jesus mean? It's a teaching lesson time. And so maybe that'll be your first challenge, to pray about that and ask God for guidance on that. Let me show you the next interesting thing. It turns out if you're using Zoom, that you can create a whiteboard, and you'll see this whiteboard. They'll call it a Kanban or whatever. It'll have 3 different panels like this. And during the meeting, one of you can be recording into this table what is happening, what is being spoken. And this is an endlessly moving whiteboard. So it can go down and down and down and down. It'll never end, and you slide it up where you want it to be. The reason this is so useful and beneficial is you can then link this to everybody and send it to them. And for them to open it, all they have to have is a Zoom account. And then when they're shared something like this, that will show up in their Zoom account when they click the link. And so they have to open up or log into Zoom and then click the link, and they will be able to see the prayer table that everybody saw inside of your Zoom. If you're the administrator for that particular function of taking prayer down, listing the prayers in the group. So this is a great way of keeping people in the loop who can then look at that link every week. The link never changes. The prayer list whiteboard never changes, and it's just simply being growing week from week to week. And then, by the way, that's a way of keeping prayer list of the record of God's answer to prayer, and also those things that we need to keep praying about that God has not answered, or we need more guidance about that particular issue. So this is the core, I think, of what a fellowship is about, where you pray for one another, you praise Yahweh for the answer to prayer, and basically you worship Yahweh and in the Lord Yeshua's name. So to help you find this, if you look into your own Zoom account, you'll see these options, and you'll see something called whiteboards on the left. You can go there and you can create a file, rename it prayer lists. You can pick this Kanban table up here, or they have meeting notes. These are also another way of looking at it. And I think I picked meeting notes because it had the post-its already there, and then that gave me the idea of adapting it. And then when you give a link to someone, that link will then show up here. Did someone say teamwork? When a whiteboard is shared with you, it will appear here. So somehow they make the whiteboard come into the other people's basic Zoom account. So I haven't had someone share with me their own whiteboard, so I don't know how actually that works. But that's the assumption I'm making reading this link here, this page on Zoom. Okay, so hopefully you'll make that work. Okay, and then you have the lesson time, and it turns out there's usually not a lot of time for the lesson because of all the prayers and praise requests, which is really what worship is all about. But there should always be a reading or two, so make sure you build that into some time for that. But if you can do an actual teaching or lesson about something, that would be great. But it should be based on quotes from the Bible, from the law, prophets, writings, and the words of Jesus in particular. Okay, and then we decided to add in here the prayer of Balaam. This is in every synagogue service in Judaism and has been since the time of Moses, and it's called the Ma Tovu. However, the Ma Tovu in Jewish synagogues has been embellished, so they basically have the first line of the prayer, and then there's all kinds of other uh, adaptions or additions, and so it's never the entire prayer anymore. At least that's how it was presented on Wikipedia. So the best thing to do is just take the entire prayer of Balaam, and you'll see it here on this next page. It's from Numbers chapter 24, and this you could begin from verse 1 all the way down, and verse 2. Balaam, well, let me, yeah. Balaam lifted up his eyes and he saw Israel dwelling tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. So this is an inspired prayer by Balaam, although Jesus reminds us in Revelation chapter 2 that Balaam is going to be executed here for having taught the people they could eat meat sacrificed to idols, and they could fornicate. So, and then you don't have to read verse 10. So I put a line there, but you could still read it. Balak was angry at Balaam blessing Israel, and so did the opposite what he was hired to do, but he did the right thing in this situation. So it just goes to show, just because the Holy Spirit's upon you doesn't mean you never fall. That's another important proof, and that's why if you were a Jewish person and somebody ever said you're eternally secure, they'd laugh at you. What are you talking about? What about Balaam? He's going to hell because of what he taught. So otherwise, God wouldn't have had him killed, right? And then we have the Our Father, and this is slightly different than the standard, only in the words there. Do not lead us into the hands of a test. That's actually the better translation. If you look at Mouncy, reverse interlinear, you'll see that's actually a good meaning for it, and that's a better meaning as well. And even the next sentence in Mouncy, if you look at it, the meaning of it is, in other words, put the two sentences together, and do not lead us into the hands of a test, but even if so, that is, even if you put me to the test, keep us free from all evil. So don't let us fall into sinning when you give us this test. So God tests his people by, he says in Deuteronomy 13, 1-5, allowing false prophets who are going to try to seduce you from following my words here given here today, and that's the Ten Commandments in context of Deuteronomy 13. So that's a test from God. The false prophet comes, he contradicts God's words, and you succumb to it. That would be falling into evil, right? So you don't want to fall into evil. So that's what I would put on my mind when you're hearing this. I don't want to listen to false prophets, and it's not just somebody from 2,000 years ago. They're still out there today claiming that they have a message from God and so on, and it never ends. So anyway, okay, and finally we come to the closing of the service, and this has slightly been modified. And so I did some research on whether it should say the blessings on the children of Israel, or what I concluded what it means is the children of the land of Israel. And a lot of other translators have actually made that more clear by just changing it into bless the Israelites, both here and in the closing end, the next verse after this prayer is finished. So I think that's the right way of doing it, because Israel and all the people had to follow God's law were living in the land of Israel, or were born in the land of Israel. So even the Gentile was considered Israelite once they were born there, but they're not sons of Israel, but they're Israelites. That's different. So look for the download in the description. You would see a URL to an Airtable database. It will have the PowerPoint version of this as well as the PDF. If you want, if you don't have PowerPoint, you just run a PDF and you just go through the slides one by one. So everybody can use this in either of those two formats. Okay, God bless. Take care, everyone. Ciao, bye.